The Galactic Council chamber was quiet as the holographic display flickered to life. Ambassador Krethvar of the Veloran Collective adjusted his sensory stalks and leaned forward in his floating chair. Around him, representatives from 47 different species watched the same transmission with growing concern. "This recording comes from the frontier station Omega-7, announced the council speaker, a massive crystalline being named Thorol. "It shows the first documented combat engagement between Terran soldiers and Craxian raiders. I must warn all delegates that what you are about to witness may disturb those with sensitive physiologies." Krethvar had heard rumors about the humans for several cycles now. They were a young species, only recently discovered on the outer edge of the galaxy. Their world was classified as a Category 7 death planet, a place of extreme gravity, toxic atmosphere, and constant natural disasters. Most species avoided such worlds. The Terrans had evolved there. The recording began. It showed the interior of a mining station. Craxian warriors, feared across 3 sectors for their brutal efficiency, moved through the corridors. They stood 3 meters tall, covered in natural armor plating, and carried plasma rifles capable of melting through reinforced steel. The station had 17 Terran miners and 3 security personnel, Thorol explained. The Craxians numbered 42. Krethvar did the mathematics quickly. It was a slaughter waiting to happen. The Craxians were professional killers. The Terrans were a primitive species that had only achieved interstellar travel within the last 100 cycles. What happened next changed everything Krethvar knew about the universe. The first Terran appeared on screen. She was small by galactic standards, barely 2 meters tall, with no visible armor or natural weapons. She held a primitive projectile weapon in her hands. Behind her, 2 other Terrans crouched with similar weapons. A Craxian spotted them and raised its plasma rifle. Before it could fire, the female Terran moved. She moved faster than Krethvar's eyes could track. One moment she was behind cover. The next moment she was in the air, sailing toward the Craxian raider. The Craxian fired. The plasma bolt struck the wall where the Terran had been standing just a heartbeat earlier. But she was no longer there. She was on top of the Craxian now, her primitive weapon pressed against a gap in its armor plating. 3 sharp cracks echoed through the recording. The Craxian fell. "Pause the recording," requested Ambassador Vethneen of the Cylindar Republic. His 4 eyes were wide with what Krethvar recognized as fear. "How did that creature move so quickly? Our records indicate Terran physiology is nothing special. Average strength, average speed. They have no natural weapons, no armor, no venom." Thorol's crystalline form pulsed with soft light. "That is what makes this recording so significant. Our scientists have analyzed the footage extensively. The answer lies in the Terran biochemistry." A new display appeared beside the paused combat footage. It showed a diagram of a Terran body with various chemical compounds highlighted. "Terrans possess a unique hormonal response to danger," Thorol continued. "When threatened, their bodies release a chemical called adrenaline. This substance temporarily enhances their physical capabilities far beyond their normal limits. Their hearts pump faster. Their muscles work harder. Their reaction times improve by significant margins. Most remarkably, this chemical also suppresses their pain response." The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Krethvar felt his sensory stalks curl inward with disbelief. No species in the known galaxy could simply ignore pain. Pain was the body's warning system. It protected organisms from harm. To suppress it was biological madness. "That is not all," Thorol said, silencing the chamber. "There is another factor. Watch the recording carefully." The footage resumed. The female Terran did not stop after killing the first Craxian. She kept moving, kept attacking. Her 2 companions followed her lead. They charged directly into a group of 7 raiders, screaming at the top of their lungs. The sound made Krethvar's auditory organs ache. It was a terrible sound, full of aggression and fury. It was the sound of a predator that had no intention of retreating. The Craxians, beings that had conquered dozens of worlds, actually stepped backward. They hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, the Terrans struck. The Terrans call this a battle cry, Thorol explained. It serves multiple purposes. It releases more adrenaline into their systems. It coordinates their attack timing. And as you can see, it disturbs their enemies. Krethvar watched the rest of the recording in stunned silence. The 3 Terran security personnel cut through the Craxian raiders like a plasma torch through ice. When one Terran was struck by a plasma bolt, she did not fall. She did not even slow down. She looked at the smoking wound on her arm, screamed louder, and killed 2 more Craxians before her body finally failed. By the time the recording ended, 31 Craxians were dead. The remaining 11 had fled the station in their raiding vessel. Of the 3 Terran security personnel, 1 survived. The other 2 had died from their wounds, but not before ensuring every civilian miner escaped to safety. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Finally, Ambassador Grathkel of the Morthian Empire spoke. He was a massive being, covered in thick scales, representing one of the oldest warrior cultures in the galaxy. His voice was low and troubled. "I have led armies for 300 cycles," he said slowly. "I have fought against the Void Reavers, the Crystalline Swarm, and the Machine Consciousness. I have never seen anything like this. These Terrans do not fight like civilized beings. They fight like animals, worse than animals. Animals know when to run." "The Terrans seem to lack that instinct," Thorol agreed. "Our psychologists believe it is connected to their evolutionary history. On their home world, the only way to survive was to fight. Running often meant death, so they evolved to stand and fight, no matter the odds." Ambassador Krethvar finally found his voice. "What does this mean for the Council? The Terrans have applied for membership. They wish to join our community of species." The question hung in the air like poison gas. Krethvar could see the fear in the eyes, stalks, and sensory organs of his fellow delegates. The Terrans were dangerous. That much was now clear. But were they dangerous enough to be rejected, or dangerous enough that rejecting them would be unwise? "There is more information to consider," Thorol said. "The Terran delegation has arrived. They have brought with them a demonstration of their combat capabilities. They wish to show the Council exactly what their warriors can do." Krethvar felt his secondary heart begin to beat faster. A demonstration. The Terrans wanted to show off their fighting abilities. Either they were incredibly arrogant or incredibly confident. Perhaps both. "I have allowed this demonstration," Thorol continued. "It will take place in the Council arena in 1 standard hour. I encourage all delegates to attend. What we learn today may shape the future of galactic civilization." The delegates began to disperse, talking nervously among themselves. Krethvar remained in his seat, staring at the frozen image on the holographic display. It showed the female Terran warrior in mid-leap, her face twisted into an expression he did not fully understand. Her teeth were bared. Her eyes were wide and wild. It took him several moments to recognize the expression. He had seen it before, in ancient recordings of predator species from primitive worlds. It was the face of something that enjoyed the hunt. Krethvar shuddered. Whatever happened in the Council arena, he suspected the galaxy would never be the same. The Council arena was a massive structure, built specifically for demonstrations, tournaments, and diplomatic displays. It could seat representatives from every member species, with specialized environmental chambers for those requiring specific atmospheric conditions. The arena floor itself was made of a self-repairing compound that could withstand plasma fire, kinetic impacts, and even small-scale nuclear detonations. Krethvar took his place in the Veloran observation platform and looked down at the arena floor. It had been configured to resemble an urban environment, with buildings, streets, and various obstacles. The lighting was dim, simulating nighttime conditions. The scenario has been designed by the Terran military advisors, announced the arena controller, a synthetic intelligence named Axis. It represents a hostage rescue operation. 20 armed opponents hold 10 hostages in a fortified building. The Terran team must eliminate the opponents and rescue the hostages within a limited time frame. Murmurs spread through the audience. 20 armed opponents was a significant force. Most species would send at least 40 soldiers to handle such a scenario, preferably with heavy support weapons and orbital bombardment on standby. The Terran team will consist of 6 individuals, Axis continued. The murmurs grew louder, 6 against 20, with hostages to protect. It was suicide, it had to be some sort of mistake. The doors at the far end of the arena opened. 6 Terrans walked onto the arena floor. Krethvar studied them carefully. They were varied in appearance, with different skin tones and body shapes. 3 were male, 3 were female, though Krethvar understood that such distinctions were relatively unimportant to Terran military capability. They wore black clothing that seemed to absorb light, and they carried various weapons that Krethvar did not recognize. The leader of the group was a male with dark skin and cold eyes. He raised one hand in what Krethvar assumed was a greeting toward the observation platforms. His face showed no emotion whatsoever. "That is Commander Marcus Stone," whispered the delegate beside Krethvar. "He has served in something the Terrans call special operations for 20 Terran years. Our intelligence reports suggest he has participated in over 300 combat operations." 300. Krethvar did quick calculations. That was more combat experience than most species accumulated in their entire recorded histories. "The opponents will be combat drones," Axis announced. "They have been programmed to fight with lethal force. The hostages are also drones, programmed to respond realistically to the situation. If a hostage is killed, the mission is considered a failure. The time limit is 10 standard minutes. The demonstration will begin on my signal." The 6 Terrans moved to their starting position. They did not speak, but Krethvar noticed them making small hand gestures to each other. Some form of silent communication, perhaps. "Begin," Axis said. What happened next was burned into Krethvar's memory forever. The Terrans did not move like the beings Krethvar was familiar with. They did not advance carefully, checking corners and securing positions. They exploded into motion like particles accelerating in a reactor core. Within 3 heartbeats, they had crossed half the distance to the target building. The combat drones responded with weapons fire. Plasma bolts and projectiles filled the air. Any rational being would have taken cover. The Terrans did not take cover. They moved through the fire, twisting and turning in ways that seemed to defy physics. One Terran female actually rolled under a plasma bolt that should have taken her head off. The first drone died before Krethvar could process what was happening. Commander Stone had produced a blade from somewhere and buried it in the drone's processing core. He did not slow down. He ripped the blade free and kept moving. The arena filled with the sound of Terran weapons. Unlike plasma weapons, which made a distinctive whine, the Terran weapons produced sharp, rapid cracking sounds. Each crack represented a projectile moving faster than sound. Each projectile found its target. "They are not using cover," observed Ambassador Grathkel from the Morthian platform. His voice carried across the arena. "Why are they not using cover?" Krethvar understood the confusion. Every military doctrine in the galaxy emphasized the importance of cover and concealment. Soldiers were supposed to protect themselves, to minimize their exposure to enemy fire. The Terrans were doing the opposite. They were running directly at their enemies, as if they wanted to be shot at. Then Krethvar understood. They wanted to be shot at. They wanted the drones to focus on them rather than executing the hostages. They were deliberately making themselves targets to draw fire away from the innocents. It was madness. It was also working. 4 minutes into the demonstration, half the drones were destroyed. The Terrans had reached the target building and were breaching the walls with explosive charges. One Terran, a female with red hair, had been struck by weapons fire 3 times. She was still fighting, still moving, still killing. Adrenaline, Krethvar muttered to himself. They truly cannot feel pain during combat. The breach was complete. The Terrans poured into the building like water through a broken dam. The sounds of combat intensified. Flashes of light and muffled explosions indicated the fighting inside was fierce. Then silence. 6 minutes and 14 seconds after the demonstration began, the doors of the target building opened. Commander Stone emerged first, carrying a hostage drone over one shoulder. Behind him, the other Terrans followed, each protecting one or more hostages. The red-haired female brought up the rear, walking backward with her weapon raised, ready to engage any surviving threats. There were no surviving threats. Mission complete, Axis announced. All 20 opponents eliminated, all 10 hostages rescued, 0 hostage casualties, 2 Terran injuries, neither critical. The arena fell completely silent. Krethvar looked around at his fellow delegates. He saw shock on every face, in every sensory organ, in every bioelectric field. They had all just witnessed something unprecedented. 6 Terrans had accomplished what most species would consider impossible, and they had done it in half the allotted time. Commander Stone and his team stood at the center of the arena, waiting. They did not appear tired. They did not appear injured, despite the weapon strikes some of them had received. They simply stood there, looking up at the observation platforms with expressions that Krethvar could not read. Finally, Ambassador Grathkel spoke. His voice was quiet, almost reverent. "I withdraw my earlier comparison to animals," he said. "I was wrong. These beings are not animals. Animals fight for food and territory. These Terrans fight for something else entirely." "What do they fight for?" asked another delegate. Grathkel's scales shifted color, indicating deep thought. "They fight for each other," he said. "They fight to protect. They throw themselves into danger not because they lack fear, but because their desire to protect others is stronger than their fear. It is the most terrifying thing I have ever witnessed." Krethvar had to agree. He had seen many warriors in his long life. He had seen beings that were stronger, faster, and better armed than these Terrans. But he had never seen warriors who seemed so completely willing to sacrifice themselves for others. The demonstration was over, but Krethvar knew that something much larger was just beginning. The Terrans had announced themselves to the galaxy, and the galaxy would never forget it. The council reconvened 3 hours after the demonstration. The atmosphere in the chamber had changed completely. Where there had been dismissive superiority before, there was now cautious respect and more than a little fear. Ambassador Vethneen was the first to speak. "I move that we table the discussion of Terran membership until we have conducted more thorough studies of their species. What we witnessed today raises serious concerns about their compatibility with galactic civilization." "I second that motion," added another delegate. "These Terrans are clearly dangerous. We should not rush into any agreements with them." Before the motion could be voted on, the doors to the chamber opened. Commander Marcus Stone entered, accompanied by 2 other Terrans in diplomatic attire. One was a female with silver hair and sharp eyes. The other was a male with a kind face and gentle manner. "Forgive the interruption," said the silver-haired female. Her voice was calm and measured. "I am Ambassador Sarah Chen, representing the Terran Federation. We could not help but overhear the concerns being raised." Thorol's crystalline form pulsed with surprise. "Ambassador Chen, this is a closed session. How did you gain access to our deliberations?" Ambassador Chen smiled slightly. "We asked your security chief very nicely. He was helpful. I believe Commander Stone's team made an impression on him earlier." Several delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The implication was clear. The Terrans could access secure areas of the Council facility if they chose to. This was either a demonstration of capability or a show of trust, perhaps both. "We understand your concerns," Ambassador Chen continued. "We know that our warriors are different from what you are accustomed to. We know that we can seem frightening, but I would like to offer a different perspective." She gestured to the male beside her. "This is Dr. James Wright. He is a xenobiologist and a historian. He has studied your species extensively. James, would you please explain?" Dr. Wright stepped forward. Unlike Commander Stone or Ambassador Chen, he seemed nervous. He kept adjusting his clothing and clearing his throat. It was oddly reassuring to Krethvar. At least some Terrans were capable of normal anxiety responses. "Thank you, Ambassador," Dr. Wright said. "Honored delegates, I want to tell you a story about where we come from." He activated a holographic display, showing an image of a blue-green planet. "This is Earth, our home world. By galactic standards, it is a nightmare. The gravity is high. The weather is violent. The wildlife is deadly. We evolved alongside predators that could crush us with a single blow. We survived ice ages, volcanic winters, and asteroid impacts. We fought for every moment of our existence." The display changed, showing images of various Terran animals. Krethvar recognized some of them from the initial surveys of the Terran system. There were massive creatures with teeth and claws, swimming predators with rows of blade-like teeth, and winged hunters with curved talons. "But we did not just survive," Dr. Wright continued. "We thrived, not because we were the strongest or the fastest, but because we learned to work together. A single human is weak. A group of humans working together can move mountains." The display changed again, showing images of Terran cities, bridges, and spacecraft. "Our biology is harsh," Dr. Wright admitted. "Our adrenaline response makes us dangerous in combat. We can push ourselves beyond safe limits. We can ignore pain that should stop us. But this same biology also drives us to protect each other at any cost. When one of us is in danger, the rest will move heaven and earth to save them." Ambassador Chen stepped forward again. "What my colleague is trying to explain is that Terran aggression is not random. It is not mindless violence. It is always directed toward a purpose, and that purpose is almost always protection. We fight to defend our families, our friends, and our homes. We fight to protect those who cannot protect themselves." She paused, looking around the chamber. "We know that we are new to this galaxy. We know that we have much to learn, but we also know that we have something to offer. In the short time since we achieved interstellar travel, we have encountered several threats to galactic peace. The Craxian raiders you saw in that recording are just one example. There are others. The Void Reavers still lurk at the edges of known space. The machine consciousness has not been truly defeated. And there are rumors of something worse, something ancient and terrible, waking in the dark between galaxies." Krethvar felt his sensory stalks go rigid. The rumors she was referring to were closely guarded secrets, known only to the highest levels of galactic government. How had the Terrans learned of them? "We are offering our help," Ambassador Chen said simply. "Our warriors will fight to protect this council and all the species it represents. We ask only to be accepted as equals, to be given a chance to prove ourselves as members of galactic civilization." The chamber fell silent. Krethvar could feel the tension in the air. The offer was significant. Terran warriors, with their impossible resilience and terrifying combat capabilities, would be a valuable asset against any threat. But accepting them also meant acknowledging that the galaxy needed protecting. It meant admitting that the existing powers were not enough. Ambassador Grathkel was the first to respond. He rose from his seat and fixed his ancient eyes on Ambassador Chen. "You speak of protection," he said slowly, "but your warriors attacked our trading partners without provocation. The Craxian clans are demanding compensation for the deaths of their raiders." Ambassador Chen did not flinch. The Craxians were attacking innocent civilians. Our warriors responded to a distress signal. They did what any decent beings would do. The Craxians claimed the station was in disputed territory. They claimed they had rights to its resources. There is no dispute about innocent lives, Ambassador Chen replied. Her voice had taken on a hard edge. Children were on that station, families, scientists who had never held a weapon in their lives. The Craxians would have killed them all. Our people stopped that. If that is a crime, then I am proud of it. The Morthian ambassador studied her for a long moment. Then, to Krethvar's shock, he began to laugh. It was a deep, rumbling sound that echoed through the chamber. I like you, Terran, Grathkel said finally. You speak plainly. You do not hide behind diplomatic nonsense, and your warriors have earned my respect. The Morthian Empire supports Terran membership in the Council. The declaration sent ripples through the chamber. The Morthians were one of the founding species of the Council. Their support carried enormous weight. Other delegates began to speak, offering their own positions. Some supported the Terrans, others opposed them. The debate grew heated, with accusations and counter-accusations flying back and forth. Through it all, Commander Stone stood silently beside Ambassador Chen. He had not spoken a single word since entering the chamber. His face remained expressionless, but Krethvar noticed that his eyes were constantly moving, watching everything, evaluating everyone. He is assessing threats, Krethvar realized. Even here in the heart of galactic civilization, surrounded by supposed allies, he is ready to fight. It should have been disturbing. Instead, Krethvar found it strangely comforting. The universe was a dangerous place. Having beings who were always ready to protect, always ready to fight, might not be such a bad thing. When his turn came to speak, Krethvar surprised himself. The Veloran Collective supports Terran membership, he announced. They may be frightening, they may be different from us, but they are exactly what this galaxy needs. They are warriors who fight for something other than themselves. We should be grateful they want to be our friends rather than our enemies. Ambassador Chen turned to look at him. For just a moment, her diplomatic mask slipped, and Krethvar saw genuine gratitude in her eyes. She inclined her head in a small bow of thanks. The vote continued. One by one, species declared their positions. When it was finished, the result was clear. The Terrans would be admitted to the Council. The galaxy had just changed forever. 6 months passed. Krethvar had returned to his duties as ambassador, but he found himself thinking about the Terrans more often than he had expected. Reports of their activities filtered through diplomatic channels almost daily. Terran peacekeepers had stopped a civil war on Velthos III, placing themselves between two armies that had been fighting for generations. Both sides had agreed to negotiate rather than risk harming the strange, fearless beings who stood in their way. Terran engineers had arrived on Crystallos Prime to help rebuild after a devastating earthquake. They worked alongside the local population for 12 hours at a time, barely stopping to eat or rest. When asked why they worked so hard, they simply said they wanted to help. Terran scientists had joined research expeditions to study the Void Reavers. They volunteered for the most dangerous missions, always insisting that they go first, always insisting on protecting their alien colleagues. The pattern was consistent. Everywhere the Terrans went, they fought, worked, and sacrificed for others. It was as if they could not help themselves. Protection was in their very nature. But there were problems too. The Craxian clans had not forgotten the humiliation at Frontier Station Omega-7. They had begun raiding Terran shipping lanes with increasing frequency. Small skirmishes had escalated into larger conflicts. There were rumors that the clans were uniting under a single warlord, preparing for a major offensive. Krethvar was reviewing the latest intelligence reports when his communication device activated. The holographic image of Thorol appeared before him. Ambassador Krethvar, the council speaker said, there has been an incident. Your presence is required at an emergency session." The chamber was already full when Krethvar arrived. He noted with concern that many delegates looked frightened. Ambassador Grathkel was speaking in low tones with several military advisors. Even the normally calm Thoril seemed agitated. "What has happened?" Krethvar asked the delegate beside him. "The Craxians," came the reply. "They have launched an attack on the Terran colony world of New Helsinki. Reports indicate over 200 warships in their fleet. The colony has a population of 3 million civilians and only a small defense force." Krethvar felt his secondary heart begin to race. 3 million civilians, 200 warships. It was a massacre waiting to happen. "The nearest council fleet is 12 days away," the delegate continued. "By the time they arrive, there will be nothing left to save." The chamber doors opened, and Ambassador Chen entered. She was followed by Commander Stone and several other Terran military officers. Her face was pale, but her voice was steady. "We have received confirmation of the attack," she announced. "The Craxian fleet is currently in orbit around New Helsinki. They have begun landing troops. Our colonial defense force is engaging, but they are vastly outnumbered." "We must send assistance immediately," Thoril said. "Even if the council fleet cannot arrive in time, we must try." "That will not be necessary," Ambassador Chen replied. Something in her voice made Krethvar look at her more closely. Was that pride he detected? "Assistance has already arrived." She activated a holographic display, showing a tactical map of the New Helsinki system. Krethvar saw the mass of Craxian ships surrounding the planet. He also saw something else, a much smaller group of ships approaching from the outer system. "Is that the Terran military?" someone asked. "Part of it," Ambassador Chen confirmed. "That is the 7th Rapid Response Fleet, 32 ships, including 2 carrier vessels and 8 destroyers. They were conducting training exercises 2 systems away when the attack began. They departed immediately upon receiving the distress signal." 32 ships against 200, Ambassador Grathkel's voice was incredulous. "That is not a battle, that is a suicide mission." Commander Stone finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried through the entire chamber. "We do not plan to die," he said simply. "We plan to win." The tactical display zoomed in on the approaching Terran fleet. Krethvar could see the ships more clearly now. They were smaller than the Craxian vessels, built for speed rather than raw firepower. They moved in tight formation, weaving through space like a school of predators. "The Craxians outnumber us significantly," Commander Stone continued. "They outgun us. They have orbital superiority. By every metric your civilizations use to measure military strength, we should lose this battle." He paused and a smile crossed his face. It was not a pleasant smile. "But you have never seen Terrans fight when our families are at stake. You have never seen what we become when the people we love are in danger. Today, you will learn." The display shifted to show footage from one of the Terran ships. The bridge was filled with personnel preparing for combat. Alarms were sounding. Officers were calling out orders. But what struck Krethvar most was the expression on their faces. They were not afraid, they were not even nervous. They looked eager, almost hungry. "All hands, this is Admiral Chen," a voice announced over the ship's communication system. Krethvar noted that the admiral shared a name with the ambassador. Family, perhaps. "The Craxians have attacked our people. They have attacked our home. They think they can frighten us into submission. They are wrong." A roar went up from the crew. It was the same terrible sound Krethvar had heard in the recording 6 months ago. The battle cry. "We are going to show them what happens when you threaten a Terran family," the admiral continued. "We are going to make them regret ever hearing the name humanity. All ships prepare for combat. Give them hell." The Terran fleet accelerated. Even watching from thousands of light years away, Krethvar could feel the aggression pouring off them. They were not advancing toward battle. They were charging. The Craxian fleet reacted slowly, turning to face this new threat. They had expected easy prey, a defenseless colony world. They had not expected reinforcements, and certainly not reinforcements that seemed intent on ramming them at full speed. The first Terran ships entered weapons range. What followed was unlike any space battle Krethvar had ever witnessed. Normal space combat was a careful dance of positioning and firepower. Ships maintained distance, using their weapons to wear down enemy shields while protecting their own. It was measured. It was tactical. It was safe. The Terrans did none of these things. They drove directly into the heart of the Craxian fleet, their weapons firing continuously. They twisted and spun through enemy formations, using their smaller size and greater speed to avoid return fire. When they could not avoid it, they took the hits and kept fighting. One Terran destroyer was struck by multiple plasma torpedoes. Its shields collapsed. Its hull began to breach. Instead of retreating, it accelerated toward the nearest Craxian battleship and collided with it at full speed. Both ships were destroyed in the resulting explosion. They deliberately rammed, Ambassador Vethnine said in horror. They used their own ship as a weapon. They saved 700 lives, Commander Stone replied. His voice was calm, but his eyes never left the tactical display. That battleship was preparing to fire on the colony below. Our people made a choice. Their lives for 700 others. It is not a trade we make lightly, but it is a trade we make. The battle continued. The Terran fleet cut through the Craxian formation like a blade through flesh. They were taking losses, terrible losses, but they were inflicting worse on their enemies. Craxian ships were exploding all across the system. And then something remarkable happened. The Craxians began to retreat. It started with a few ships at the edge of the formation, turning away from the fight and accelerating toward the system's edge. Then more joined them. Then more. Within minutes, the proud Craxian fleet was in full rout, fleeing from an enemy that numbered less than 1/6 their original strength. The tactical display updated. 117 Craxian ships destroyed, 63 damaged and retreating. The remaining 20 had surrendered. Of the 32 Terran ships, 19 were still combat capable. The others were either destroyed or too damaged to continue fighting. 13 Terran ships lost. Over 4,000 Terran crew members dead. Victory, Admiral Chen's voice announced over the communication channel. Her voice was tired but triumphant. All enemy vessels have been destroyed, captured, or routed. The colony is secure. Repeat, the colony is secure. The council chamber was completely silent. Krethvar looked around at his fellow delegates. He saw shock, disbelief, and in many cases, fear. But he also saw something else. He saw respect. The Terrans had just done the impossible. They had turned a hopeless situation into a decisive victory through sheer aggression and willingness to sacrifice. They had proven, once and for all, that they were exactly what they claimed to be. Warriors who would die for others without hesitation. Protectors who knew no fear. Beings for whom the safety of innocence was more important than their own lives. Ambassador Chen deactivated the tactical display. Her face was wet with tears, but her voice was steady. "That is what Terrans do," she said simply. "We fight, we die, we protect. That is who we are, that is who we will always be." Krethvar rose from his seat. Moving slowly, deliberately, he approached the Terran ambassador. When he reached her, he performed the formal bow of his people, the gesture reserved for warriors of the highest honor. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Thank you for being our allies." Ambassador Chen returned the bow. "Thank you for giving us the chance." Around the chamber, other delegates began to rise. One by one, they approached the Terrans, offering their own gestures of respect and gratitude. Even those who had opposed Terran membership originally came forward. The galaxy had learned something important today. The universe was dangerous. Threats existed beyond imagination. But as long as the Terrans stood beside them, there was hope. The Terrans would fight, the Terrans would sacrifice, the Terrans would protect. And heaven help anyone who threatened the people under their protection. 1 year after the Battle of New Helsinki, Krethvar attended a ceremony at the newly constructed Memorial of Heroes. It was a massive structure, built on the grounds of the Galactic Council, dedicated to all those who had died protecting others. The names on the memorial came from dozens of species, Morthians who had held defensive lines against the Void Reavers, Velorans who had sacrificed themselves to stop asteroid impacts, Cylindar pilots who had flown suicide missions against the machine consciousness. But the largest section was reserved for the Terrans. Over 8,000 names were carved into the gleaming metal, 8,000 beings who had died in the year since their species joined the Council, 8,000 warriors who had given their lives so that others might live. Krethvar stood before the memorial reading the names. He recognized some of them. Captain Alina Vasquez, who had led the charge at New Helsinki, Lieutenant Marcus Chen, nephew of Admiral Chen, who had died protecting a convoy of refugee ships, Private Sarah Wright, daughter of Dr. James Wright, who had thrown herself on a grenade to save a group of alien children. Commander Stone stood beside him, dressed in formal Terran military attire. His chest was covered with medals, but his eyes were focused on the memorial, not on his own honors. "Do you regret it?" Krethvar asked quietly. "Joining the Council, losing so many of your people?" Stone was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Regret is a complicated thing," he said. "I regret every death. I mourn every warrior who will never go home, but I do not regret the choice we made. We chose to protect. We chose to fight for something bigger than ourselves. That is what makes us who we are." He turned to face Krethvar directly. "Your people once asked what we fight for," he said. "The answer is simple. We fight for everyone. For every species in this galaxy, every child, every elder, every being who cannot fight for themselves. We fight because if we do not, who will?" Krethvar considered this. He thought about his own people, the Velorans, who had evolved on a peaceful world without predators or conflict. They had never needed to fight. They had never learned how. When danger came, they hid. They negotiated. They compromised. The Terrans did not compromise. They stood their ground and fought until the threat was eliminated or they were dead. It was brutal. It was violent. It was also noble in a way that Krethvar had never truly understood before. "The Council is stronger with you," Krethvar said finally. "The galaxy is safer. Whatever price we pay, whatever sacrifices are made, it is worth it." Stone smiled slightly. "That is all we ever wanted to hear." The ceremony continued. Speeches were given. Honors were bestowed. Terran warriors stood at attention while their fallen comrades were remembered. Throughout it all, the aliens of the Galactic Council watched with a mixture of awe and gratitude. Later that evening, Krethvar attended a reception at the Terran embassy. The atmosphere was different from the solemn ceremony earlier. Terrans and aliens mingled freely, sharing stories and drinks. Laughter echoed through the halls. Krethvar found himself speaking with Dr. James Wright, the xenobiologist who had addressed the council over a year ago. The man seemed more relaxed now, though there was a sadness in his eyes that had not been there before. "I heard about your daughter," Krethvar said carefully. "I am sorry for your loss." Dr. Wright nodded slowly. "Sarah always wanted to make a difference. She used to say that there was no point in living if you were not willing to die for something important." He paused, wiping his eyes. "I think she found her something important." "The children she saved." "Yes, 3 of them sent me messages after the incident. They wanted me to know that my daughter was their hero, that they would never forget her." Dr. Wright smiled through his tears. "That is not a bad legacy, is it? Being remembered as a hero by the people you saved." Krethvar did not have words to respond. In his culture, Death was something to be avoided at all costs. The idea of welcoming death for the sake of others was foreign, even disturbing. But looking at Dr. Wright, seeing the pride mixed with grief in his expression, Krethvar began to understand. The Terrans did not seek death. They did not want to die, but they accepted that death might be necessary to protect those they loved. They made peace with that possibility and lived their lives accordingly. It gave them a freedom that other species lacked, a freedom to act without hesitation when lives were at stake. "Your people amaze me," Krethvar admitted. "I have lived for 300 cycles. I have seen many things, but I have never encountered a species quite like yours." Dr. Wright chuckled softly. "We are not that special, Ambassador. We are just survivors. We do what we must to ensure that our families, our friends, and our allies see another day. That is all." "That is everything," Krethvar replied. "That is more than most species can claim." The reception continued late into the night. At some point, Ambassador Chen made a speech thanking the Council for their support and promising that the Terrans would continue to serve as protectors of galactic peace. Commander Stone stood behind her, silent as always, watching over the gathering like a guardian wolf. As Krethvar departed the embassy, he looked up at the stars. The universe was vast and dangerous. Threats lurked in every corner, waiting to strike at the unwary. But for the first time in his long life, Krethvar felt genuinely safe. The Terrans were out there, the warriors who charged into danger without hesitation, the protectors who died so that others might live, the guardians who asked for nothing except the chance to serve. The galaxy had found its champions, and heaven help anyone who threatened the people under their protection. The story of the Terrans was only beginning. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, more names added to the memorial of heroes. But there would also be more lives saved, more worlds protected, more civilizations preserved. Because that is what Terrans do. They fight, they die, they protect. Forever and always.